Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating transformation that's happening right now along Egypt's southeastern border. We are looking at a massive 1 billion Egyptian pound infrastructure master plan. And what's so cool about this is that it takes one of nature's absolutely most destructive forces and just entirely flips the script, engineering it to fuel unprecedented national growth. The scale of this whole thing is just incredible, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive right in. We're looking at a pretty wild paradox today. Think about it. How exactly does a terrifying, destructive flash flood become the lifeblood of a massive new farm? Well, for years, the coastal cities along the Red Sea faced these severe, recurring climate threats. But instead of just building higher walls to block the water, the state decided to capture that threat and literally use it to water an incredibly ambitious 4.5 million acre agricultural expansion. And we're going to look at exactly how they pulled this off.
Here is our plan for today. We'll start with the localized Red Sea climate threats, move into the defensive infrastructure projects, look specifically at protecting Rose-aly, explore the massive agricultural expansion, and finally discuss how all of this ties into managing national food security. Starting right off with Part 1, Red Sea climate threats and the region's geographic vulnerability. Now, to understand the cure, we really have to understand the disease. The Red Sea Governorate, especially down south in areas like Haleb and Shalatin, faces a very unique geographic trap. Imagine living in these coastal regions pressed right up against the rugged Red Sea mountains. When heavy winter rains hit those peaks, the water basically has nowhere to go but down. It rapidly accelerates into these unprecedented, highly destructive flash floods that barrel right toward residential neighborhoods and tourist hubs. Every single winter, this specific natural geography turned rainfall into an absolute crisis. Which brings us to Part 2. Defensive infrastructure projects, and actually building the shield. The state recognized pretty quickly that a simple Band-Aid solution just wasn't going to cut it. They diagnosed this severe threat and invested over 1 billion Egyptian pounds to protect citizens and crucial infrastructure. And the sheer volume of what they built is staggering. We're talking 65 flood drains, 10 new dams, and 7 totally new artificial lakes along the mountains. And this isn't just some proposal on a desk. This infrastructure is 100% completed. The artificial lakes are especially critical here. They aren't just puddles, they act as massive catching basins. They absorb the kinetic shock of the flood, holding the water harmlessly in the desert and diverting it safely away from urban centers.
Let's zoom in a bit for Part 3, protecting Rose-aly, which serves as the first line of defense.
So how did this defense actually get built? Well, the city of Rose-aly and the neighboring village of Zafarana faced some of the absolute highest risks of recurrent flooding, which directly threatened the vital coastal road connecting to Hurghada. So they built the defense system in stages. Back in 2018, they secured Wadi al-Darb with a lake and a dirt barrier. Then in 2019, Wadi Hawashio was secured with 3 lakes and a barrier. Fast forward to the present in Wadi Araba, and they've implemented this massive system of 3 lakes and 3 directional barriers. Step by step, they just layered these defenses to shield the city.
And to fully complete this protective shield for Rose-aly, they engineered something truly massive, a 12-kilometer artificial canal. Think of it as a literal moat for the city. It's strategically positioned to intercept that furious mountain runoff and divert it completely around the city limits before it ever even reaches residential zones. Coupled with another canal down in Al-Qasir, this 12-kilometer trench safely routes millions of gallons of fast-moving water away from homes, fundamentally neutralizing the flash flood threat.
But get this, they didn't just route all that water into the sea and forget about it. In northern Rose-aly alone, these artificial lakes and barriers in Wadi Araba have achieved an immense storage capacity of 11 million cubic meters. Let that number sink in, 11 million. They have effectively turned a deadly natural hazard into a giant vault of fresh water right in the middle of the desert. And that leads us to its ultimate purpose. You see, this infrastructure isn't just a shield. It's a sponge. The floodwaters are harvested in these artificial lakes where sediment is allowed to just naturally settle out of the rushing water. Once the water is calmed down and clarified, it's routed straight to purification plants for treatment. After it's treated, it gets safely pumped back into the system for civil use and, crucially, to irrigate crops. It's brilliant. They took a destructive force and just totally re-engineered it into a strategic national resource.
Now, this sets up a really fascinating national balancing act. Everyone knows Egypt has strictly limited national water resources. Yet, at the same time, they have this incredibly ambitious mandate to massively expand their agricultural lands. So, how does a country with limited water radically expand its farming? The answer is ruthless efficiency.
By capturing every single drop, like these harvested Red Sea floodwaters, and treating them for reuse, the state creates the vital margins needed to actually grow.
Let's explore that massive expansion in Part 4, Expanding Agricultural Lands and Scaling the Triumph.
The sheer scale of this ambition is, frankly, wild. Historically, Egypt has relied on roughly 9 million cultivated acres to feed its population and drive exports. But the current master plan, fueled in large part by these brilliant water management strategies we just talked about, aims to add a staggering 4.5 million new acres to the grid by 2026. That is exactly a 50% increase in the nation's total farmland in just a few short years. And they're prioritizing these new lands for strategic crops like wheat and corn, along with high-yield export fruits. It's just a colossal undertaking.
And we are already seeing the economic momentum from this. Just to give you a surprising little fact, in just the first 10 months of the year, Egypt exported 7.5 million tons of agricultural produce. That's an increase of over 650,000 tons compared to the same period the previous year. So the land is producing and the exports are growing rapidly.
But what does this actually mean for the everyday person? That brings us to our final section, Part 5, Managing Food Security, the realistic approach. When people hear about 4.5 million new acres, they usually assume the goal is 100% total self-sufficiency. But let's break down the actual numbers. Take wheat and corn. Egypt produces about 10 million tons domestically, but they still need to import roughly that same amount. For cooking oil, because they don't have massive expanses of crops like sunflowers, they import about 90 to 95% of their needs. Sugar is a lot better. They're near self-sufficient there, importing only about 400,000 tons. The reality is, absolute self-sufficiency across the board is pretty much impossible for most nations.
And this reveals the core philosophy of the entire master plan. True food security isn't necessarily about growing every single grain of wheat or pressing every drop of oil right inside your own borders. True food security is having the economic resources generated through national progress and high-value agricultural exports to comfortably acquire what you can't grow yourself. Those 4.5 million new acres, they're about generating massive economic capital, allowing the country to smoothly import the gaps, like that cooking oil.
I want to end our explainer today with this really powerful thought from the source material. You must first diagnose the disease well to be able to treat it. I think that sums up the entire Red Sea Master Plan perfectly. The state looked at the devastating flash floods not just as a random tragedy, but as a symptom of a water management problem. By diagnosing it accurately, they built an intricate cure, dams, canals, and lakes, that not only stops the destruction, but harvests that very same water to fuel millions of acres of new life. It really begs the question, what other massive natural challenges could we transform into our greatest assets if we just engineered them a little differently? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.